Good morning. We're here to present a project that we actually planned together for a collaborative class that we teach. We focused on a biology course where we actually have to introduce the next generation science standards. And what we did was something called biomimicry basics. Our whole purpose and intent was to look at how nature actually included new products and things that our students could actually engineer. A couple of things that we're going to address as we go through, like what happened with our projects. We're going to look at the purpose for the investigation and why we did it. We're going to talk about how the collaborative class came together and like the reason we wanted to focus on that group of students. The plan of action that we used, where did the money go, the timeline, conclusions and outcomes, and then a reflection of what we would do different if we get the funding to do the project again next year. Basically, the purpose for this investigation, like I said, was to kind of give the students an inclination that science doesn't just have to be about learning about things that people have already discovered. We wanted to give them the opportunity to realize that you can promote life science and biology in a way that makes things unique to them. It also allowed them to incorporate some things that they were interested in. I don't know if you saw the picture that I had on the last slide, but one of the things that we did when we introduced this project was I talked to the kids about some things that have already been created based on biology and life science skills. Let me show you that picture real quick. And this is one that I actually used to kind of incorporate my girls into class because we all know the girls love their fashion, they love their high heels, but they may not necessarily like the science. So what I showed them was a new design of high heel where they're actually designing the heel based on the skull of a bird because their bones are very light, they're very hollow, so they can stay lifted in air. So the idea is that the shoe has the capability of being very light so it doesn't slide off the foot or do anything that's kind of just heavy and clunky for them. So it's kind of like you hooked a few of the kids then. And then we went with this idea of what it would actually allow the students to do. They get to do some analysis, communication, they get to write their own proposals, problem solving. And that's kind of where I'm going to let him talk about why we chose the collaborative group with the problem solving methods.
As a special education teacher, you've got to try to level the playing field. So one thing I like better than anything is working with Ms. Flannery because she's a great teacher, and I think that when I come into that classroom, it's a different aspect. It's a way of, I think, different than the way Ms. Flannery does. So when we work together, it's a whole new level. And a lot of people don't realize is that special education, you know you're a learning disability, so you know what you got to do and what you got to make up for. So having hands-on, it gives you that chance, a different aspect of a kid looking at it differently. And you group them together and you come up with different concepts that, you know, famous people have learning disabilities, so they deal with stuff. And, you know, doing things with clay and other stuff really helps out, gives it a different aspect, a different viewpoint of what could happen and what you could do with the same level playing field.
As far as our plan of action, what we started with was splitting the groups into smaller groups. Like with our collaboration class, we have 28 students in there, and a lot of times for our special ed students, it's a little overwhelming because it's like if we're going through a piece of content that they're not really grasping or we're trying to moderate or alternate the lessons for them. What this did was it allowed us the opportunity to kind of group them intentionally. So we could pick out certain skills in certain students. That way we knew we had a presenter. We knew we had someone who could do the design. We knew we would have someone who could do the building. It was basically us taking what we've learned about them all year long and incorporating it into one project. The second thing that happened is we did introduce the idea of biomimicry to them. Talked to them a little bit about some other things, like I showed you the high heel. The next thing that we looked at were like the gecko climbing shoes and how the pads on the feet are designed to match geckos so they can kind of adhere and stick a little bit better. So it was just things that a lot of times, especially even here in Eastern Kentucky, our kids haven't really been exposed to a lot of these things because the first time I put shoes up with toes, they were kind of like, not really flying. I'm like, okay, but it's a different thing to look at. And after we introduced all of these different concepts and examples to them, we kind of turned them loose. And I know that sounds chaotic, and in a sense it is, But what it allows them to do is it allows them to think about things that they want to change, and it allows them to think about something they would like to see created. So what they started to do was to design a market plan and a product of their own. So the money that we used, or that we got from the grant, we used it to buy modeling materials. This year we used Model Magic because I was kind of hesitant about clays and things like that. Didn't really know where I was going, and I had worked with Model Magic with some classes in earlier years. We did assorted sizes, colors, that way they could have some variety in the projects. I did landscape grid legal pads, so they had to do a blueprint, so it pulled some engineering and designing in. Post-it easel pads that had grids for the same purpose, but they could actually do things to scale and draw the projects out. Presentation books, and then I ordered some 3D printer filament. We're lucky enough to have a media center where Mr. Akers and his students actually 3D print a lot of pieces and parts for us, so I didn't have to worry as much about buying big kits as much as I did just having to work with them on the technology. The timeline was designed to be a 7-day lesson. We kind of lost some of our 7 days. I'll talk to you a little bit about that in the reflection because we missed some for flu and sickness in the district. But on day 1, the idea was group assignments, biomimicry introduction, and brainstorming for the project. Our students are part of a one-on-one initiative in the county, so they were able to use their own laptops in class to research some things. Day 2 to 3, they were to design, create the blueprint, and do a materials list. The way we designed the lesson, the idea was to have day 3 on a Friday. That way, over the weekend, if they needed to pick up extra materials, things like that, they would have the time. Day 4 and 5, they actually construct the product and develop their market plan. And then day 6 and 7, they were going to present to the class. This is just a couple of pictures of the kids working on their blueprints, and the girls were kind of talking about their marketing plans. With conclusions and outcomes, I do want to talk about some of the projects that the kids actually designed. Probably one of the most innovative ones, and one of the ones that surprised me most, was actually the group of young ladies that are in this picture. They came up with this idea about makeup. Of course, we were going that route. But they always were complaining about how makeup sticks to the inside of a bottle. And they're like, Flame, makeup costs so much. And they're like, we don't even get to use it all. So what they started thinking about was something that I'd introduced during an ecology unit. And we talk about examples of like ducks and how they use oil in their feathers to keep like the water from adhering so it doesn't weigh them down. So the girls actually did research, and they found out that that oil is vitamin D based. And what they did from that was they actually tried to design a bottle that was laced with like a vitamin D oil, and they put products, lotions, makeups, paint, and everything in with that to see if all of it would slide out. They did several demonstrations, several models. They did their little market plan as an Easter basket with Easter coming up. So they actually came up with an idea of how can we market a bottle that has an additional oil that won't ruin products and it's still natural. They also went as far as to find out that you could do an extraction from the duck without it actually harming the animal, which was something that they were kind of concerned and worried about. The boys in the picture here, they worked from the idea of a Venus flytrap. They're all fascinated. They all think it's something that it's not, and sometimes we have to discuss that. But they wanted to use it for the idea of a filtering process, and they designed it to help clean small aquariums. At first, it started out with this idea of, Flan, we want to put them in the ocean, and we want to help clean the ocean. And I was like, you're talking a lot of material. We probably don't have an ocean nearby to test it. Let's go fish tank. So they did some modifications. Their model ended up being about a 6-7 inch model. They were concerned because they couldn't make it move yet, but they had the patent down for the idea for how they would want to design it and actually use filter feeders to kind of help cleanse the water. So even though it's something that they could build onto later, they already had that initial design. Conclusions and outcomes. The students definitely learned about biomimicry. They have that idea of structure and function. They did work in teams. They used a lot of technology with the 3D printers and with their presentations. Marketing proposals was a good chance for them to present, and that's one thing when looking in retrospective, definitely would have to adjust. We still have to have some of our groups present tomorrow because we're out today and we missed last week for spring break. So timing was something that we had a problem with. Whereas if we could shift it earlier in the year, I think it would have helped us. So we would have to do some rearrangement of units just to make it fit the content where we need it to. And then teacher reflection, we did, again, talk about the timing, but it's something that we would like to expand to all the biology classes, not just the collaboration, because now I think we kind of realize it's something all the kids could benefit from and not just our special ed students. Any questions? Thank you.